We'll crack on with our second discussion of the day and then have a break. This one is entitled Why Staff Leave and What You Can Do About It, and is presented by Tim Cox. In this hour, we'll tackle the most common reasons for high staff turnover, how to better retain personnel, and the practical tools to aid engagement. Tim Cox is the Managing Director of Management Futures and an Executive Coach. His clients include Nissan, Coca-Cola, Saracens, Leaders in Sport and the European Tour. And we'd like to say now BIGGA as well. So please welcome Tim Cox.
Thank you very much. And it's great to be here in Harrogate. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the introduction, Gareth. I should just share with you that apparently Harrogate is in Africa. That's according to my 4-year-old daughter for reasons that are way too complicated to go into right now. So welcome to Harrogate in Africa. Okay, so we have about an hour to explore this topic, and then we'll make sure that there's time for some questions. What I want to let you know is that I'll share some research, I'll share some insights, and what I'd like to do is to encourage you to get involved as well. So please know there will be some short exercises that are designed to give you insight as well as me bringing the insight as well. Okay, so expect for that to happen. So why staff leave and what you can do about it. The good news is that 75% of the reasons staff leave can be attributed to areas managers can influence. Okay. So managers can influence 75% of the reasons why staff leave. Not all, but it's the 75% that we're going to be dealing with today and that we're going to focus on. The 75% that we can actually control and make a difference with. Okay. I believe that topic or that percentage rather, for a number of reasons. One, it's compiled by Gallup. Gallup are an organization who've spent decades looking at this. They have more data and insights on workplace and workforce engagement than any other organization in the world. So it stands the test there. They've assembled this data from employee polls, from exit polls, from interviews. So fundamentally, I believe the data from the beginning. I also believe it from my own personal experience as a coach, as an executive coach. So I've had the pleasure to work with hundreds of people on one-to-one conversations around their development, exploring their ambitions, their hopes, their fears, their challenges, their victories. And the one thing that is guaranteed to come up in almost every conversation at some point is their relationship with their line manager. The relationship with the line manager is huge. So undoubtedly, line managers can make it the best of times. So they can bring such engagement and such life and challenge to a role that it can be the best of times for people. I've certainly seen that and I've experienced that to an extent myself. And also, regrettably, if we get it wrong, and I'm a line manager myself as well, if we get it wrong, we can make the staff's life a living hell. And I've been there too. So that's the second reason. The third reason is my own experience on the end of line management. So I've experienced it all, I guess. Well, probably not all, but I've been managed now for a good 25 years in various ways, various roles, various jobs. And I've experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I've experienced the maverick manager who promised me the world. He promised me the Aston Martin, retirement by 40, happy days. I wanted to believe it, but he sold it to me. I ended up skint, couldn't pay the rent, and looking for work. I've experienced the well-intentioned, so genuinely well-intentioned manager who unfortunately couldn't deal with poor performance. With members of the rest of the team, and therefore that poisoned the atmosphere because nobody could be engaged if that wasn't being dealt with over here. Okay. I've also experienced the over-the-top management, the bullying management, the directorial management, and a little bit more on that in a second. And on a couple of occasions, I've experienced the management that I'm looking for, the management that truly engages me, the management that forgive me, but had me leaping out of bed in the morning to get there, because I wanted to, because I felt engaged, because I felt like I belonged in this organisation. The manager that believed in me more than I believed in myself, and they took me to a much better place. Okay. So I mentioned the dictatorial, the bullying manager, and I had one experience a number of years ago now, so it's going back about 20 years. And I had a particular experience where I'd started work with a bar company. So it's a London-based bar company, but they have bars around the UK. And I loved it. I was a trainee manager, and I'd done 6 weeks bar training. So the theory behind it, you go in, you do your bar training, you get to know the cocktails and the drinks and how it all works. Then you move across and you do a bit of waiting, and you get to know the floor service, and then you spend a bit of time in the kitchen with the chefs. The idea being, you know the whole run of the organisation before they give you any management keys, before they give you any responsibility. And I loved it. They delivered on what they said they was. It was a good, vibrant place to be. They were developing me, they were investing in me, and it was interesting. I'd got to the end of my first 6 weeks, and I was transferred to another place to do my floor training, so the waiting training. And I arrived, and there was a South African lady running the bar, and she was awesome. She was fantastic. She had everybody engaged. Everybody knew what they were supposed to be doing. Everybody did a good job. Everybody took pride in the service and the quality that they gave. And yes, we had some laughs as well. And there was a little bit of drinking going on after hours, but that was part and parcel of certainly the bar trade in those days. So we had some fun as well. And it was, whilst having some fun, at the end of about 2 weeks, first 2 week period, the atmosphere just took a bit of a turn in the staff conversations at the end. Somebody had mentioned that he'd be back next week. He'd be back next week. And I said, well, so who's he? Well, he's the general manager. Okay, so what's he like? Oh, you'll find out. You'll find out. Now, I did find out. Now, I'd like to give him a name, but I just want to check. Is anyone in the room called Vince? Anyone in the room called Vince? No. Okay, I didn't want to do that to anyone, so let's give him the name Vince. So Vince showed up on the Monday morning, and he was shocking. So he was bullying, he was manipulative, he was directive, he was everything you wouldn't want to be, really. And he took me from a place where I was this high, loving my job, to 7 days later, I was outside head office, ready to hand in my resignation. Okay. And the impact of this manager, Vince, on me was something that it showed me the stark truth that a manager and the impact the manager can have on the climate in an organisation. From one point being greatly engaged, warm, cooperative team, to another one cold, fractured, just not functioning as a team at all. And that stays with me to this day, and I can still feel it. I can still feel it. So that's the impact that we can have as managers. From Management Futures, the organisation that I work with, we're absolutely certain that the work that we do can have a positive impact on managers, can upskill them to give them the knowledge, the skills, the mindset to be able to make that difference and to be able to make more of the people who are super engaged versus the ones who are disengaged. And we believe that managers can do that too. So any manager, whether they just manage one person or multiple people, can have that impact. They can have the impact on the individual. They can have the impact on the individual's family, on the individual's friends, and I believe out into the community. So it's a huge responsibility to be a manager and an obligation, I think, to be the very best that we can be to impact on people's lives at work and outside of work. Okay. So what we're going to focus on, as I said, is the 75% today. And the first thing I'm going to do is just to quickly find the slide that I want. So I'm just going to click through. And it wasn't at the front because I got my slide deck in the wrong order. So what we're going to explore what some of the highest performing environments do. We're going to look at how you can translate some of the research that's been done here by Gallup into real world action. So ideally, each of you will go away from here today with a couple of points of refreshment. So I'm undoubtedly sat in a room with people who can manage. Many of you might have lots of experience. Many of you might be quite exceptional managers. I was at dinner last night and I was told that this was going to be a room full of talent. So I take that as read. What I hope to do is to provoke, to refresh some of what you already know, hopefully give you some new insights, and ideally some practical tools that you can actually take tomorrow or whenever it is that you get back to your roles to make a positive impact. Okay. How does that sound? Yeah, okay, good. I'll take the one nod that I saw as a standing ovation, and that's where we're going to go. Okay. So first up, some of this research from Gallup. So top 5 predictors of turnover. First one is the immediate manager. If employees report that their manager's expectations are unclear. So if they do not know where they need to focus their energies, if they do not know what they should be doing and where they're headed, then that is a predictor of turnover, because people get dissatisfied. They need to know where they're headed. Okay. If the manager provides inadequate materials, equipment, or resources for them to be able to do the job, eventually that will frustrate them enough that they may take the decision to leave. And also, if opportunities for progress and development are rare. And for me, this is an interesting point, because for some of you, undoubtedly, there'll be career paths and there'll be places that people can progress to. And some of the time, it's into your role. So you might be the block to them. For me, this is about helping people, even if there is no immediate jump in your organization for them to go to, that they still develop, that they still progress in their role. They get better at what they do. Okay. Another predictor is that poor fit to the job. So if somebody perceives limited opportunities to do their best work every day, to do effectively in leadership development terms, this would be about strengths. So if they do not see an opportunity for them to be able to use their strengths, the things that they're good at, the things they enjoy doing, and the things that energize them. You know, we can see people when they're working to their strengths, can't we? There's a bit more about them, a bit more smile, a bit more step about them. So ideally what we need to do as managers is make that fit for them. This one will come back. This one plays into 3 and 4. Co-workers not committed to quality. Okay. So if they perceive that other members of the team are not actually attaining or aspiring to high quality work, eventually that will erode their enthusiasm, their engagement, and they're more likely to go. Okay. Goes back to the well-intentioned manager that I talked about earlier, didn't deal with poor performance. Okay. And that kicks into pay and benefits. People who see that poor performance, poor quality, poor standards are not being addressed, they'll expect more. They'll expect more pay, they'll expect more benefits, because I tell you what, pay me for the heart and soul I'm giving the job versus, let's call him Vince again, versus Vince over there who isn't doing it. Okay. Does that make sense? And this backs it up again. Engaged employees are far more likely to perceive that they're paid appropriately. Okay. So if they're engaged, even if the pay isn't huge, if they're engaged and they have a purpose and they understand and the poor performance is being dealt with elsewhere, they'll feel more engaged. Therefore, they'll think, actually, pay's okay, thank you very much, because I'm getting a lot out of this job. And then finally, the connection to senior management, to the organizational goals that are there. And I think this is something for managers is a key role, to continue to make those connections and to see where perhaps hierarchically the lowest people on the rung can see where they impact, can see where they connect to it. I think as managers, that's one of the things that we need to translate for them. Okay. So, and why people leave. So people leave for a number of reasons, and some we can't control. So there's 25% there that we're unlikely to control. ever. But they leave for a career advancement, promotional opportunities, pay benefits. So the interesting one there again, if they're engaged, they'll see that the pay's better, they'll be less likely to leave. It'll be less impact. Lack of fit for the job, again, strengths. Can we get them working to their strengths within the role? And then the management or general work environment, which I take to be the climate and the atmosphere that you create for your people. I was talking to somebody last night about flexibility in scheduling. One of the major reasons they love the role that they're in is that they're able to drop their kids off for school in the morning. So what can we do, even if it's just a small amount, just to flex enough that they can get what they need to get? Have we had the conversations with them to find that out? Okay. Okay, so some of the high-performing environments that I may reference, I'll reference shortly or quickly now, and I may come back to them as we go through the next 45 minutes. Saracens, so for those of you not familiar with rugby, they're arguably the best team in well, certainly the UK, maybe Leinster. But they've won 4 Premiership titles in the last few years, and they were back-to-back European champions as well. They're fated really for the culture that they have at the organisation, the environment they have, and that comes through on the pitch. So they seem to fight for each other more than some other teams sometimes. We've been lucky enough to work with them for the last 5 years, get to work with the players, get to work with the coaches, and also, and critically, the support team around them. So it's not all about providing the support for the players and the coaches, it's also about the support team around. One of the things that they do very, very well is they build trust. They build trust between each other, and that is not by accident. They spend time and focus on having conversations that will build knowledge of one another and build that trust that comes. And then that comes through in the environment. When you walk into that environment, everyone shakes your hand, everyone greets you. Doesn't matter whether they're Owen Farrell or the kit man. Everybody is treated on a level. Great environment. Adobe. So Adobe aren't a client. What they've done very well, and I admire them hugely, is a lady named Donna Morris in 2012, their senior vice president for HR, did away with their employee evaluations, so their appraisal system at the end of the year. Just scrapped it. Scrapped it because it takes too much time and it doesn't really serve the purpose. Normally what happens, you get together at the end of the year and somebody says, well, I'll tell you what, let's give you a 4 out of 7. Yeah, I think it's a 4. It would have been a 5. But do you remember back in February when you were a bit peeved off that morning and you said such and such, that person, going to mark you down for that. So it just doesn't work. What Adobe do very well is they have regular check-in conversations all the time. And they've trained their managers and leaders and everybody else to do that. So they have regular check-in conversations. Farfetch believe in talent, believe in the potential of youth. They're basically a tech fashion company. So if this is your thing, it's not my thing, but if it's your thing that you like Chanel shoes, they will get you a pair of Chanel shoes from Greece in about 24 hours if you need them to wear to the conference tomorrow. They're hugely growing, good organisation, and they have late 20-year-olds in senior global roles. They invest in their talent, and then they support that talent. Okay. Hawksmoor, really high standards, again, huge. So there's steak restaurants, great steak. Great steak. If you've not experienced a Hawksmoor restaurant, get yourself there. It's worth the investment. They're huge in investing in their people. And again, they set challenging targets, and they ask questions, and they engage their teams. Does anyone recognize the CAP badge? Bottom corner there. It's the CAP badge for the SBS, so the Special Boat Service. Okay. Talk about through strength and guile is their motto that you probably can't make out on there. Through strength and guile. So yes, strength. Yes, one of the elite fighting forces in the world, but also this guile piece, using your head. And one of the things, so I'm lucky enough to work with a chap who was in the SBS for 6 years and the Marines before that. I was struck by the amount of questions they ask when they conduct reviews. They conduct hot reviews and cold reviews, straight after action or straight after a live training session. And in each review, they make sure that everybody that they're debriefing gets asked the questions. How did we do? What did we do? What could we do better? Lots of organisations do that. What they do differently is they make sure that even if something's been said before, they hear it from the next person. So there's no, yeah, what he said or what she said. It's, what do you think about this? Even if you repeat exactly what the person has said, you've still got a voice. And what that does is it encourages the whole team and the whole collective wisdom to engage. Okay. And then finally, English Institute of Sport. They're a client. We train their performance lifestyle practitioners who support athletes, the Olympic athletes. You'll have strength and conditioning, you have sports psychology, and you have sports-specific coaches, and then you have the lifestyle practitioners. And the lifestyle practitioners help the athletes to be in the best possible place with the rest of their life. Okay? So it's completely holistic. So they treat them as a whole person and take interest in outside so that they can then perform on the track or in the water or wherever they do it. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to reflect on two questions. It's the first of our exercises, by the way. One is to identify in your memory someone who has had a great positive impact on your development. Okay? So this could be a previous manager, it could be a teacher, it could be a member of your family, but someone who, when you think of who's had a really good positive impact on my development. Okay? And then what I'd like you to do is to pair up with a person next to you and one of you to share, just for 90 seconds or so, who was this person and what was it they did? What were the behaviours that they exhibited that actually engaged you and developed you? Okay. And then I'd like you to swap over. Okay. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. So I imagine you're starting to filter who are these people. Once you've got that person, please turn to the person next to you. If there's no person next to you, make it a 3, that's fine. But please share who's this person and specifically what was it that they did? What behaviours did they exhibit? Okay. Please start your conversations. Thank you. Okay, and if you haven't swapped over, please do so. Please swap over and share the other way. Okay, so if you could just bring those conversations to a close, please. We ask people to do this in a variety of different formats, and often it's a very pleasant experience. We've forgotten about these people. We've forgotten about these people who've had this positive impact. So actually just to go back there and think on it can be quite, well, a good thing to do, So usually what I do in smaller groups would be to debrief this and bring it from you. What I'm going to do is to share with you some of the key points that typically come out in terms of specifically what was it that they did, what were these behaviors that they exhibited. And here's some of them. So they listened, they gave you time, and they genuinely cared for you. They challenged you, they held you to a high standard. So they're not always the people who are really soft around you, they can often really stretch you. They saw the potential in you, they believed in you even when you didn't. They gave responsibility and they trusted and they allowed you to make mistakes. So they gave you some license, generally not so much that you'd bring the whole thing crashing down, but enough that you could make some mistakes in some safety. And they asked questions to draw out your thoughts, not didactic, not always at you, telling you what to do. They provided excellent support, accessible. They remained calm in difficult situations. Typically this comes up, that they gave feedback. Now, not always skillfully given, but they would generally let you know where you stood. They would let you know where you stood. And they would focus on learning, not blame. Okay? And then this bottom line here, they walked the talk, and fundamentally you trusted them. Okay? I'll just check whether those things resonate with this audience. Yeah, can I have just one hand up? Thank you very much, sir. That's great. Right, so I'll take that as read across the board, and we'll move on. So these are some of the things that come up. And we've looked at this, and we've honed it down to three key attributes or themes. They have the ability to build trust. Okay. They have what we call mission leadership, and I'll come back to that a little bit later, in terms that they provide clarity. You know what you're supposed to be doing. They give you feedback when you're not potentially doing it, or you're not doing a part of it correctly. And then they give you the freedom. They give you the freedom to allow you to do it. Counter, they provide structure to give freedom, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay? It's not freedom to do whatever the hell you like. It's freedom within a context and within a structure. And then finally, this leading with questions, and I believe that there are some workshops been running around coaching skills, non-directive coaching skills. In fact, I know that because I'm running one later today, but I believe there was another one. So this leading with questions is a key part as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to look in turn at each of these three things. This all plays into the 75% that we can influence as managers to help retain staff. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is, in about a minute, I'm going to ask you again to pair up. And what I'm going to ask you to do is have in mind, each of you in that pair, something that you're happy to talk about for about 90 seconds. Okay? Something you're happy to talk about for about 90 seconds. This should be a good thing. This should be a positive thing. It could be something you love about the role that you do. It could be a holiday that you're planning. It could be a sport you love. It could be a hobby you have. Whatever it is that is positive that you're happy to share with the person next to you. Okay. Then what I'm going to ask you to do is one person will share that story and the other one will listen to the story. Okay. I'm just going to grab two chairs. Sorry, can I grab this one here? And I'll show you how I'd like you to set up. So what I'd like you to do is set up so that you're both about this position. Okay, so one person here, one person here. This person will be A, and A will talk to B about this thing that they're passionate about, this thing that they enjoy. Okay. What I'd like B to do is to notice the body language, notice how they sit, notice how they position. So if they're sat like that, and that's not going to cause you an injury, then copy them, okay? Or if they sound like this, if they're quite forward, then you also match forward. Please don't copy them. So if they're scratching their ear and you start scratching your ear, that's going to be really odd. So we're not about that. But what we're about doing is saying, I see you, I recognize you, we're similar, okay? We can build trust with people, okay? So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So to set up, firstly like this, and what I'd like is for this person A, who is sharing the story, to have their back pretty much to the stage. So I'll need B to see me and A not to see me. Does this make sense? Excellent. Can you do that first? Can you set up in the chairs a little bit like this? Please don't set up like this. It's a little scary. Okay, so next instruction. What you will need to be aware is that person A will share for about 90 seconds what they're passionate about, what they're enthusiastic about. Person B, you'll match their body language and you will listen to them. You can make affirming noises, so by all means say yeah or yeah, I'm with you, but let's not get into a conversation. Let's not ask them questions. Let's not make any comment. You are literally present and you are listening to them, okay? At a certain point in that 90 seconds, I'm going to raise my hand. At that point, I want you to break this connection, okay? Please don't get up and leave the room. What we're talking about here is a break in concentration. So perhaps you check your watch, perhaps you tie your shoelace, perhaps you see someone across the room that you want to engage with. So we're looking at a break. When I put my hand down, which will be about 10 seconds later, please re-engage. And person A, your role will be just to keep talking. Just to keep talking if you can, okay? So everybody clear? Any questions? Okay, so, yep. Yeah, so the person talking has their back to me. That's exactly right. So the person talking has their back to me. So when you're ready, person A, start talking. Person B, listen and look out for my hand.
For a little interview, a tiny little interview, like a synopsis of what you've been talking about. When's the best time to do it?
We could do it straight afterwards or soon afterwards if you like.
When the next speaker's on after.
Okay, so we'll stop there if we can. So please stop with your stories. So, how was that when that break came in? How was that for you? When the break came in, you handled it? Yeah, okay. Typically what will happen is that the person listening, when they break rapport, the other person will lose their flow. Okay, they will lose their flow. Now, they may, if they're good at this and if they're really used to it, just keep going. They may be able to just keep going. The chances are, though, that some will get completely distracted and lose their flow. They might be curious. They might be humoured by what's happened, as in, this is ridiculous. But they're unlikely to be doing their best thinking anymore. Okay? And equally, this can have a feelings impact. Okay? So we can judge this behavior. So when someone's listening to us and then they become disengaged for whatever reason and they look away, we can judge that as rude, we can judge that as disrespectful. I've done this many times by way of demonstration with audiences. I actually flush, my colour change. I feel, even though I know it's coming, when it happens, I feel almost incandescent with rage. How dare you take your attention away from me? So just notice the impact that it can have. I'd like you to swap over so you all get that. So please, B's and A's, swap positions. And this time, person B, I would like you to talk about something that you're passionate about for about 90 seconds, and then I'll put my hand up and break that rapport. Okay, please start. Okay, and we'll leave that there, please, ladies and gentlemen. I can see from some of the reactions that even though we talked about it, even though you knew what was coming, it still has an impact. It still has an impact. Although I don't seem to be having much right now. Can I bring the room's attention back to the stage, please? Okay. So hopefully you'll see that even when we've flagged it, even when we've said, look, this is going to happen, this is what's going to happen, it still has an impact, even when we're waiting for it. And we're talking about something positive here. Just imagine, if you will, one of your team coming to you to talk about something that may be worrying them, that may be a real concern for them. You might not be aware of it until that point, but they're bringing it up, and it's something they've been anxious about. It's something they've been talking with their wife about. It's something they've been talking with their husband about, their partners. This is something they're going to have a chat with their line manager about, okay? And you, not aware of this, not aware of all the backstory, break rapport with them, okay? You get the attention of, I don't know, the club chairman's wandering past, and you just give them a bit of a wave. Imagine what the impact is on the individual that you're with, okay? Okay, so top tips, be present, okay? So be there with them. Demonstrate that you're there with them by matching their body language. You do that standing up, just match where they are, okay? You can match tone of voice, you can match eye contact, language, energy, all of these things. Believe me, you can practice these skills and you can get better and better. Connection with people, yes, we have a natural affinity to some people who are similar to us, it's easier. You know, we go into a networking room, we see someone wearing the same outfit, you know, we'll probably gravitate towards them. But we can build trust with people who are dissimilar to us too. Okay. Ideally, remove distractions, so external or internal. If you're having a conversation with someone and you know that this is a thoroughfare and people are going to walk past and be waving at you, turn away from it. Take it out of the equation. Commit to not thinking about who's picking up the kids and whether or not it's chicken dinner tonight, which you've had sort of 6 nights on the trot and don't really want anymore. So put away our internal distraction as well. Signal timings and be decisive. If you can't be there, if you simply do not have the time at that point, don't be, okay? Be clear. Say, I'm very sorry, I can see that this is important for you, I really don't have time right now. Let's have a cup of tea at 3 o'clock and chat this through when I can give you focus, okay? Rather than be halfway in, halfway out. The number of conversations that I witness when I go in to do walk the floors in different organizations and fly on the wall type studies where people are half in and half out of conversations, they notice this. They notice that you're not giving them your attention. It has an impact, okay? Okay, so in terms of this mission leadership, I'm going to highlight 3 leadership cultures here. First one, and this comes from, this is oldie schooly and stand the test of time studies. So a chap named Kurt Lewin in 1942 came up with performance, so P equals T times E. So performance equals talent times environment, okay? And done a lot of work looking at different leadership styles. We've been studying this now for close to 20 years in various organizations, and these seem to be true, okay? You get the laissez-faire style of leadership. The warm, supportive style provides autonomy, but it doesn't do enough to actually activate people's attention. There's no clear leadership on vision. People do not know where they're supposed to be headed, and there are avoidance of these performance issues. diametrically opposed to that, you've got the authoritarian style, the stern, I know best, do it this way. So people get told what to do, but they're given little involvement or autonomy in the decision-making around it, a little opportunity to actually develop their talent. They're a machine, go do. Okay? And the focus here is on the senior people deciding what happens and then implementing this often through micromanagement. Okay? Quite debilitating for confidence and for development and skills. What we'd advocate is the mission leadership style, the one that will unlock a full potential and full talents in pursuit of this ambition. So you combine the clarity of focus, high standards, accountability, give them autonomy, but you really do give them feedback. You give them regular feedback and positive feedback. Okay? Why is it feedback conversations always seem to be the negative ones? Okay? We need more positive feedback conversations. Okay. So it's mission leadership that we'd aim at. In terms of providing clarity, so here's a quick tool, a practical tool that I'm going to share with you that I'd invite you to take a picture of or note down. This is something that was shared with me about 10 years ago. It's simple, it's practical, it works. I share it with almost every leader that I work one-on-one with, and without question, they adopt it and they see its relevance. Okay? This is about providing clarity for what we are doing. Okay? First up, so there's 4 Ps. First one, picture, the what. So what's the vision here? What are we aiming to do? So we're aiming to have the best greens in southern England, for instance. We're aiming to win awards for what we're doing here. You know, whatever it is, the big picture stuff. Okay? Purpose, well, for one, I'd love to do that, and I'd love to have the team recognized. Also, obviously, it will work in terms of growing our club and growing our membership and everything else if we have these high standards. So you give them very clearly a why, a what and a why. Then you talk about the plan, and you describe what you know about the plan and perhaps what they can play into the plan. Okay? So this is what we're going to do. First step this, second step this. So there's a bit more detail normally around that third P. And then crucially, and this is the bit that most people get wrong when they're communicating change messages in organizations, is the part piece. This is the who. This is the roles piece. Okay. This is what's my part in this. Okay. So I'm going to set the direction. I'm going to make sure that we've got the materials that we need. I'm going to handle the senior management here and talk to the board and tell them about our vision and how we're going to do it, okay? Your role in this, you're going to get fully behind it. You're going to invest your time, your energy. We're going to work together here. I want your feedback. You know, these sorts of messages. So we're very clear with them what our role is and what their role is, okay? And you can repeat this and repeat this and repeat this to different audiences, okay? It's very adaptable and very practical. Okay. If you've got a question on the 4 Ps, please note it down while it's in your mind, and we'll have time at the end for some questions. Okay. Whilst you get up to speed with it, I'd really advocate that if you have a message that you want to convey and you want to inspire and you want to engage your team, that you spend some time crafting that message so it becomes fluent for you. And then a final piece on the 4 Ps. If, for some people, they can't hear the picture, they can't hear the why, the purpose, they can't hear the plan until they know what's in it for themselves, okay? We can't. You know, the biggest concern in any change or any situation normally is, how's it going to affect me? How's this going to impact on me? If you feel that's the case, start with part. Here's what I need from you. Here's what you can expect from me. Here's where we're going. Here's the why. Here's the plan. Okay. So that's about creating clarity. Here's another one for delivering feedback. Okay. So this, again, is well tested and effective for people. Again, it's a shortcut in constructing feedback messages. A number of times I've spoken with people who are losing sleep over the fact that they need to talk to somebody about something. They just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to raise it. They know that they need to, but there's a block. How do I go about this? What's the best way? I don't want to upset them. They do a good job otherwise. Maybe I'll just let it ride. Maybe it will resolve itself, okay? Try BIF, okay? So first up, we describe the exact behavior, okay? And we're non-judgmental in this. So last week, you arrived at 9:15 for the 9 o'clock meeting, okay? That's it. So be very specific about the behavior. Can't argue with that. It's a fact. That's what happened. Then describe the impact on you and on others, okay? So the impact was that it meant we couldn't really get started until you arrived. It had a knock-on for me because we were late and I needed to get to another conversation with the board. And also it meant people were hanging around and not really utilizing their time. So describe the impact. Again, no judgment. And then if you like, you don't have to do this, but it can supercharge the feedback, is offer a feeling. It left me feeling frustrated and a little disappointed, if I'm honest, because we've had these conversations about timekeeping before. Okay? So a bit frustrated, a bit disappointed. And then really importantly, future, so the future part of it. So either you can ask them at this point, we've already had a conversation about this, we spoke last week, it's happened again, what are we going to do here? So either you engage with the questions and put it over to them, what are you going to do here? Or you suggest something. Can we agree that in future, you will be 5 minutes early for every meeting that we have, for every appointment that we have? Yes? Okay, great. Let's just agree that that's agreed, and let's just keep checking in on it. Okay. Does this make sense? Okay. So a highly practical way for delivering feedback. And just to be very clear, that can be for when people are doing something right as well. So I noticed when you were having that conversation with one of the members, I noticed that you heard their question and you gave specifics on what was wrong and what the work was going on at the moment around the 7th green or whatever it might be. The impact was that I saw that member's shoulders come down and they actually seemed to understand what was going on. Made me feel quite proud, actually, because we're communicating well what we're trying to do here on the course. Let's agree, do more of it, make more of it happen. Okay, so we can use it for the positive too. And then I talked earlier about giving people the freedom, giving people the autonomy to be able to make their decisions and to make their mistakes sometimes. So in order to give them some freedom, we need to have a structure in our minds as to when is it appropriate to give them freedom and what freedom should we give. So this is a classic model. Many of you have probably seen it before. This is adapted from Hershey and Blanchard's model on situational leadership. And we've adapted it so that it becomes a little more obvious what we're talking about here in terms of push behaviors and pull behaviors. So a shortcut in your mind when you're having a conversation with somebody can be, should you choose to accept the premise, how much push do I need to put into this conversation and how much pull, okay? Because on some occasions, you're going to have to push. You're going to have to get the message across. There may be no debate. There may be something that's urgent that needs to be done. This is not a conversation. Please, this needs to be done, okay? So you're going to be high on the push. In other places, you may be really high on the pull. So this is a situation. I'd like you to be sort of looking after this area if you can. You've proved last time that you did it. I'm going to let you get on with it. You make your calls. Check in with me. Let's agree that we're going to have a conversation next week and I'm going to hear your plan about what you're going to do, okay? So on one hand, high push, on the other one, high pull. And these 4 boxes give us a framework and a reference point where we can make decisions around this. So the bottom right-hand corner, the mainly push. Get your message across, and they need to receive that message. Then we move up to top right, and this is more of the mentoring style and more dialogue. So here's what we need to do. Here's what we've done in the past. Here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't worked. What do you reckon? What's your approach going to be? So we're telling them, but we're also asking them. Pure non-directive coaching, would be pull only, which is, this is the situation. What questions do you have for me around this? What do you think the approach needs to be? What's going to get in the way of our success here? How are we going to approach this? Who else do we need to involve? So it's very much, they've got the potential to deal with it. You're going to help them to think and solidify their thinking. And then finally, that hands-off approach, which is basically, you've done it lots of times. These are normally the people who are knocking on your job, and you're thinking, where are they going to go next? Okay, they need this. They'll need this area where they can prove themselves. Okay, does this all make sense? Okay, good. Okay. And in terms of the coaching approach, I'm not going to major on this, but that grid up there on the left-hand side, hugely effective in terms of a management tool. If we go back to where people are most comfortable, normally what happens is we flip between mainly push, where we're telling people, and then we leave them to it. So you've got to do this, you've got to do it in that way and get on with it. And then we flick completely off to hands off, and we leave them to it for 2 weeks, and then we come back and we say, what the hell are you doing? I asked you to do this, you haven't done it, and so you shout a bit louder, okay? And we flip between these two. So the ones that tend to be ignored are the mentoring ones and the coaching ones. There's just a quick slide here on 4 key applications of that non-directive coaching approach. One is absolutely empowers them to get out there and do something and feel that they own something. Really useful for problem solving, okay? And it takes some of the weight off you sometimes for always being the person who has to solve something, if we can prompt the people around us with the questions. It goes back to the special boat service, with their reviews, engaging the whole team. There's a collective wisdom out there. We don't have all the answers, that's for sure. I definitely don't. Debriefing and review, just touched on it. And then also about challenging existing thinking. So how can we approach this differently? Yes, we've been doing it for 5 years in this way, but how can we really mix this up? How can we really make a difference here in a different way? What other approaches are out there? What's the science telling us? Okay, so in taking a coaching approach, we need to know what a good coaching question is. So there's just some points here. Again, this might be in the refresh zone in terms of what you might already know. So ideally what we're doing when we're looking to take that coaching approach is we're looking to ask only open and closed questions. So what I mean by open questions is ones that start with how and what, typically speaking, ones that will elicit a response. And then we also need to bring in some closed questions as well, some that will elicit a yes-no response. Have we spent enough time on that? Is that clear now? Can we move on? So both of those are into play, but typically speaking and arbitrarily, 80% of your questions should be open questions that get the other person thinking. Okay. And then on the flip side are questions that we should just be aware of as managers if we're looking to really engage our staff. That leading and advice in disguise questions are not always the best way of going about it, okay? So have you thought about this? Is not going to acknowledge their brain, okay? If we've got an idea, why don't we share the idea? Just say, look, I've thought about this. What do you think? What other ideas do you have? Rather than putting it into a question. Wouldn't it be a good idea if you trotted off and did this? Okay, it's advice in disguise. It's not a question. If it's not a question, let's not make it a question. Let's just make it a statement. Okay. Multiple questions. So when was the last time you popped down there and took a look at that? And what would it mean if you didn't look at it like today? And what's the impact going to be? And how's that going to affect everyone? Nobody knows what question to answer. You get confused and generally just sort of disappear. So let's make them singular, powerful questions. And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, is avoid where you can the why questions. Okay. Why? Why should you avoid a why question? A why question can land as being quite I can't say this word. So it's going to feel like an interrogation. It can do. So why haven't you done that? Immediately the person is on the back foot. Okay. It can feel quite accusatory, and it means their energy of the individual goes on the defense. They feel that they need to justify. It's a great question for investigative journalists. It's a great question in science. It's not a great question for engaging the people that you work with. Okay? You can rephrase every why question with a what or a how. Okay? So why haven't you done that? Versus, so what stopped you? It's a very different feel. So if we can, please be cognizant of the questions and the language that we're using, because it has an impact. Okay. Okay, so quick time check, because I got myself confused on the times here. Am I right? I've still got 15 minutes? Okay, great. So what I'd like you to do is just to pair up with someone again and test out. In fact, if I've got 15 minutes, okay, we're going to flick to this. We're going to flick to this instead. So I still want you to pair up. Okay? And what I'd like you to do is person A first, whoever you decide to be, ask these 3 questions of the other person. So what are the key insights you are taking from this session? What skills do you want to focus on when you go back to your team? And what specifically are you going to do differently next week? And what we're talking about here is helping to retain the staff that you want to retain, to keep them engaged. So those 3 questions, I'll give you 2 or 3, well, let's give it 3 minutes each way, if you can, and I'll give a half-time notice. So whenever you're ready, in pairs, please. One person, and please have one person ask the question in rapport, and then we'll do it the other way. So don't discuss them between you. So one person asks the questions, the other one answers them. Okay, and if you could look to swap over, so about 3 minutes the other way, please. Okay. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring those conversations to a close if I can, and invite you that if I've come in too early, that you can take the conversations into the coffee break, which is coming up in just under 10 minutes. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and also then to invite any questions that you may have. So in true open question territory, what questions do you have?
One over here.
There's
Just
a
going over
microphone
here.
on the way.
Remember, no whys. It'll upset him.
With the, sorry, my name is Craig. With the
Hi, Craig.
BIF process of the feedback, which I thought was great, after that conversation, are you documenting that still, or as a something to go back on and say, okay, we did have a chat 6 months ago. If it's not documented from an HR perspective, potentially, with the cycle that you go through, is that something that's important?
Yeah, that's a good question, Craig. Thank you. So I think whatever you can do, so personally I think one is an HR perspective, so if there's something that needs to be documented with your HR rules and regulations, then that's important, and HR will be able to give you a steer on what is and isn't appropriate in terms of recording that. In terms of for yourself, what's vital really is that you go back on it. So whatever it is that might give you that check, whether you make your own diary, calendar thing to say, speak to Bob next week, to offer him some further feedback on what we've agreed. And that way, you actually can have the opportunity, hopefully, within a week, to be giving positive feedback to Bob. I've noticed 3 times now, for this meeting, that meeting, you're on time. And I want to thank you for that. I want you to, and you describe the behavior, the impact, the feelings, and the future again. And what you're doing then is you're reinforcing that positive behavior quickly. So I think that's a great shout. But whatever it takes for you to remember to keep going back to it. Thank you. What other questions do we have?
Questions?
So
I'll just ask one as I come over here, sorry. Just to back up on that, what about just documenting the feedback back to the person you've had it with? Do you email them and say, we agreed this, we discussed this, this and this? Or is that something that can be seen as negative, but equally you can come back to it and say, we did have this conversation. If they ever say to someone, oh, you never told me this, you never did this, you can go back to it and say, these are the points and I have asked you to do it. Yeah,
so I think it depends where you are in the relationship. My take would always be to have it man to man, woman to woman, man to woman, but to have it personally here. I think we spend far too much time communicating via email.
No, I mean, if you've had the conversation face to face and you've discussed it, but then you're documenting it afterwards, say, thanks for meeting today. We discussed A, B, and C. Is that a good thing or not?
Yeah, you could do. Personally, I wouldn't. I'd make a note for myself that I need to go back and I need to have a conversation to pick up on this, mainly to reinforce the new behaviours, and also a reminder that if they haven't responded to this, to go back and say, well, if you remember, we spoke last Tuesday and we agreed X. So a good note on that. I actually think, because what you're doing when you're delivering this feedback is you're doing it in a way that should build the relationship. Okay? You're not judging them. You're not saying this is rude behavior, outrageous behavior, irresponsible behavior, disrespectful behavior. What you're saying is, this is the behavior. This is the impact. This is how I feel. Can't argue with that. I can't argue with how you feel. This is what I think this is what we agree moving forward. So there's no heat in it. And what you're doing is you're treating them adult to adult. Even if you're senior to them, you're treating them adult to adult. And so to then send an email to follow it up, I think you run the risk of dissipating some of that value of the face-to-face contact. Okay.
Firstly, thank you for that session. That's really interesting, and I can see, if I think back through my career and all of the awkward and difficult conversations I've had with my team, whilst I went into them with the best intentions, I can see where I've completely ballsed them up with with inappropriate use of what is quite simple language techniques and changes. Yeah. I wish I'd done this before I started managing people, and I could have used this to start formulating some of my habits, which unfortunately now are pretty well formed, If you've got any hints and tips on how I can stop using the word why and how I can stop picking my phone up during conversations, and because these things are kind of programmed into me now a little bit, and I'd like to change them in the right moment.
Yeah.
However, the heat of the moment when you're having an awkward conversation, I'm afraid words just tend to pour out rather than me thinking exactly which one to use.
Yeah.
Any ideas, anything, any clues?
Okay, so firstly, to acknowledge your honesty. So thank you. I worked with a neuro surgeon up in Manchester a few years ago, and he came on a 2-day program, and at the end of it, he came up to me, and he was a really tall man. He stood over me. He said, "Tim, I like you, but you're an arsehole. Where the hell have you been?" and he was retiring in 6 months' time, so you seem like you're a long way from that, so plenty of time to have an impact. In truth, I'd get help, and I mean, when I say that, I mean engage your fellow manager. Yeah, I can see from up here. So engage people to support you. So I would speak with my team and say, do you know what? I know I pull my phone out a bit often, and I know that I ask why questions. And I went along to the conference the other day, and this is what I found out. I'm going to attempt to cut that out because I don't think it's that effective. I want you to pull me up on it. So that would be one way. And then another way, in terms of the why questions, is I would write down alternatives to why questions. So if you ask why questions regularly, and you'll know the kinds of questions you ask, is just write the why question and then come up with a how or what that fits for it, and practice saying them.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question.
Got one more thing over there. Stuart's just going with the other mic.
The kind of problem I would have is we get on really well as a squad, and they're quite well informed of what happens within the golf club. But because we're well informed and give them information on, it almost becomes like a debate, with the jobs and stuff like that, and it's almost counterproductive. And then you become, okay, no, this is more like the direction that I'm going, so you seem more stern.
Yeah.
I have probably sometimes a balancing act probably to achieve.
Yeah. And what's your question there?
How would I manage that better?
Okay.
They're getting well informed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's opened up now almost to a debate
Yeah.
of, job distribution and stuff,
Yeah.
where it is counterproductive.
Yeah. Understood.
Yeah.
So you've empowered them so much that now they're getting in the way. Yeah. I understand. I would be inclined to sit down with them, get some dedicated time to just check in on how we're working together and to raise it. Just say that on occasion it becomes difficult for me and I'm not quite sure how to navigate it. And I might introduce the situational leadership model to them and say, look, most of you guys or girls, you're up this end. You know what you're doing. So I'm either going to take a coaching approach or I'm going to delegate it to you. However, there are occasions where this is not a debate. This is not a forum for you to give your wisdom and knowledge on this topic. I've got something to communicate with you. And I would ask for permission for you to flag which one you're going to use when. Because if they know what's happening, then they should be okay with that. So I would be explicit. Okay. How does that sound? Okay. In theory. Yeah. The practice is always a bit tougher. And I'm sure it can work.
It's an excellent presentation. But I'm looking at a lot of these scenarios, and I'm seeing them in the other direction. And I'm sure I probably speak for quite a few guys here, where we see that our managers, which tend to be members or club committees, always said that we work in an industry where the people who run the golf clubs have absolutely no idea about the running of a golf club, and yet they're the guys in charge.
Yeah.
And just wondering if you've got any advice in how you can work this in the opposite direction.
Yeah. So my first word would be carefully. Yeah, it's a classic conundrum. So very often at the end of either short workshops or longer programs, they'd say, "Oh, I wish can we not get them on? Can you not come down and speak to them because they need this?" So I definitely think the 4 Ps could be really useful here in communicating what you see as your role and your team's role in it, and asking them to play the part that you need them to play, so that you've got a vision for what you're doing, and you can see where they can play in. So your part, your team's part, and their part. This is what I need from you. And you can do that in a very respectful way, obviously, and so that can be useful. BIF can be useful. BIF can be useful. So last week when I was talking to one of my colleagues, you came in and you were very keen to talk to me about X, and you interrupted our conversation. The impact was that I lost my flow with a team member, and we didn't get the message communicated that we needed to. And I felt a bit frustrated because I wanted to give you the time, but I was right in the middle of something and I just wanted to finish it off. Can we agree that if you need something, you let me know and I will dedicate my time to you. But when I'm in the middle of the conversation, can we agree not to do it then? Something of that ilk. So I think 4 Ps, I think BIF can work. And also the rapport. So noticing the body language, matching them, matching their language can have a big impact because they will see you subconsciously as more like them. Okay. And now I'll be quiet for a minute. Thank you.
Okay. Any more, guys?
Silence reigns. Okay. So I think are we there? And we're there on time?
Yeah.
Yep.
Happy? Any final remarks?
Just that, so there we go. Now I need to bring out my final remarks from somewhere in my head. So I'll just leave you with the fact that I totally believe that 75%. By the way, it was the chief scientist in workplace management at Gallup that came up with that figure. And he said at least 75%. I believe at least 75% is it within our remit to influence. And it isn't always easy. And if we practice and apply ourselves, we can make a massive difference, both in terms to our well-being as managers and importantly to the staff's well-being as managers. So thank you very much for listening and being attentive today. I know there's coffee coming up and you're probably dying for me to be quiet, so I will be quiet. Thank you.